Which one is the right one?
One in your hand.
Let me say good evening to you, both collectively and individually, and thank you again for inviting me to Florida. As probably most of you know, this used to be my home in Tallahassee, Florida, but when I was with Governor Ruben Askew for 8 years, I was all over the state of Florida. And one of my favorite places was coming to Fort Lauderdale and in this area. But I'm just delighted to see all of you. Let me say that right from the get-go. And now, one of the things that they invited me for, they asked me to talk about, speak to the issues about confronting black folk. Where are we today? What's the state of black America? And let me start off by saying right now, before I get into that, there are three things I'm going to do. One, I'm going to talk about the state of black America. Two, I'm going to start, but first I'm going to talk about the state of Fort Lauderdale. Then I'm going to talk about what black folks should be doing at the end of my remarks. But let me say this to you. I was very disappointed to find out that you all had a major fight going on down here. And that you were fighting before you even get together. One thing my Jewish friends just often remind me of, they said, Dr. Anderson, the biggest difference between you black folk and Jews, they said, we fight after we get the money. You black folk always fight before you do anything. And I don't want you doing that. I want you all to come together and play as a team. And why? Because you're facing racism. Now, they told me, they said, Dr. Anderson, you come down here, you got to understand that a lot of people in this area, they're very upset with your coming down here. They don't want you to come down here. I said, why not? It's because you are a racist. I said, who said it? He said, some whites and blacks said you're a racist. And I said, first of all, I would love to be a racist. Because, see, a racist is a power concept. It's a power concept, first of all. It signifies that somebody must have a lot of power. And secondly, it is a group-based concept. You cannot be a racist as an individual, especially an individual, a poor individual. And for Dr. Anderson to be a racist, contrary to what you all might have heard, when did Claude Anderson enslave millions of people? Who did I ever enslave? Who have I ever Jim Crow segregated? Who have I ever castrated and lynched? What children have I denied the fruits of an education? When did I deny people a living, a religion, and a chance to marry? When did I deny people have land and resources? If I did none, they can't show me that, then how in the world can I be a racist? For a very simple reason. Because 99% of the people who make that statement don't know what the hell racism is. That's the problem. They keep confusing racism with personal preferences and getting along with somebody, liking somebody, and loving somebody. That is not racism. And I'm sick and tired of hearing people use the word, well, he's a racist. A black person cannot be a racist any place on this earth. All right. You don't own enough power and group wealth to be able to empower, enslave, and deny people resources. So you can't be a racist. And I know good well ain't no racists in Fort Lauderdale. Because you all haven't got a window or something to throw it out of. You don't have enough resources to be a racist. As I hear, you're going to have a conference like this one, where all you're doing is coming together with your own people to talk about problems that are peculiar to you all. And you got all these organizations, particularly white organizations, they're racist. Look at them, they're meeting and getting together, planning and plotting and scheming. You're supposed to. You're supposed to. Now, they don't go down and criticize the Cubans, the Hispanics, the Asians, the Arabs, American Indians, and Jews for coming together with their people and planning and working out their problems. Why is it that they always pick on black folk? Why do they do that? For a number of very particular reasons. That's what we're going to talk about today. They do it for some very particular reasons. They do it, first of all, as I said, out of ignorance. Because they don't know what a racist is. They don't know racism never existed on this earth until the 1500s. Prior to that time, people talked about tribalism, not racism. Racism didn't come into existence in public discourse and public debate until the 1500s. They came into existence about 7 to 8 years after Columbus supposedly discovered America. There was no racism when Columbus discovered America. Then all of a sudden things became changed around the world. Because you see, back in 1441, you had a guy named Henry the Navigator that discovered some blacks, 16 blacks living off the coast of Africa. He brought them back to Europe and gave them to the Pope. And the Pope made them as slaves. And they kept them in Pope, that means the Catholic Church, kept those blacks, 16 blacks enslaved, and plus the future generations that occurred after that date, kept them in servitude until about 1488. And in 1488, Pope Innocent came out with a public edict that says, this is a good thing, having these kind of people with this dark complexion working for you. He said, so if you want a slave or a servant for life, get yourself some blacks. Now, that was in 1488, somewhere like about 4 years before Columbus, 4 or 6 years before Columbus discovered America. Now, when Columbus discovered America, before he discovered again, he went back to Europe. He said, I found all this land around the world in the Americas at that time. Wide open, not enough people inhabiting to be able to do anything with it. And he says that, and we are in Europe. We are overrun with crime, food shortages, all kind of diseases. Europe was down the toilet at that particular time. Europe was in a depressed state. They said, well, you know what? We got an idea. What if we were to go develop that land in the Americas and then use labor, somebody else's labor, to do it? So by 1509, they came up with a concept called capitalism. Capitalism says, here's what you do. Instead of using mercantilism, what we've been using all these years, let's go to capitalism. Capitalism means owning and controlling the land, the tools, the resources, and using other people's labor to generate wealth for yourself. That's capitalism. Again, for you who don't miss it, I want you to make sure y'all remember this. Capitalism means owning and controlling the land, the tools, and the resources, and using other people's labor. That concept was fixed. And then they said, now we use these blacks, we can go into America, and we can develop that country. Then that was about like about 1509. Then right after that, they came up with a concept called politics. The way politics is played today, based on quid pro quo, something for something. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. One hand takes care of the other. Politics came into existence because of economics. Racism was an economic concept. It says, let's generate economics off the back of black people. And politics then, it came into existence the way it's designed now, to say now, as politicians, it's your responsibility to protect whatever revenue, whatever money, whatever businesses we come up with, it's your obligation to protect us. That is the role of politics. Politics makes no decision about a darn thing except to protect the businesses and the wealth of the country. That's what politics is about. If you want to get to a politician, you control the people that got the wealth and the businesses. If I want to know who runs Fort Lauderdale, I'll just find who owns all these big businesses, the malls, the shopping centers, the big tall buildings, the airplanes, the boats, the ships. That's where the wealth is. That's your power, not the politicians. And so at that point, capitalism came into existence. Then we'll jump ahead for a second and come right back. Now, W.B. Du Bois in 1915 defined capitalism for black folk. It says, like owning 3 or 4 ears of corn. You eat, you save, you sell, and you use the seeds for the 4th one for next year's planting. That is capitalism. Eating, saving, selling, and using planting for next year's harvest or manufacturing. Now, in either one of those definitions, did anybody in this auditorium hear me say anything? Did anybody hear me say it? Raise your hand if you did. Did any of y'all hear me say anything about social integration? No. Hear me say anything about civil rights or getting along with people? That has nothing, whether or not you love somebody. That has nothing to do with racism and nothing to do with anything with capitalism. And you live in the capitalistic society. You live in the richest nation on earth, the most capitalist society on earth. So in Fort Lauderdale, what you should be doing is practicing capitalism. Learning how to own and control the land, the tools, the resources, and using other people's labor to generate wealth. That's the issue. Now, going back to the point about racism. So when I come down here to talk to you all, you say, well, Dr. Anderson is a racist. Now, how do I get to be a racist? I don't know, but I'll accept that label. You know, I'll go ahead and take it. But I'm going to make some comments to you today. Because what's happening is that our people bought into that myth. That somehow the social integration and civil rights are going to save us. Those things have nothing in the world to do with the problem you got here. What you got to have to do here is several things. First of all, you got to stop, cease, desist in using and exercising, demonstrating inappropriate behavior. We are always doing that which is wrong, especially against our own people. We love to do things that are wrong against our own people, to make our own people look silly and foolish and stupid and criminal. That's called inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior is what we do that others don't do. That's why they got ahead of us. And so this evening I'm going to talk to you about how we must start exercising appropriate behavior. Appropriate behavior means the first thing you must do is learn how to have a group self-interest. The practice not altruistic behavior that you've been taught and conditioned, to be concerned about all people's welfare, everybody's welfare, to put everybody else's interest before yours. That's what a slave does. The primary responsibility and the sole purpose of a slave is to put the master's interest before his own. A slave is not supposed to have an interest. And nowadays, in this society, every black I run into wants to put everybody else's interest before black folks' interests. Which means what they put in place for racism way back, you're still a victim of it. And then when you change your behavior, you have to start demonstrating a competitive interest. Racism is a team sport. It's a team sport. It came into existence as a team sport. When 9 European nations, after Columbus, says, we're going to go develop that land. We're going to get into a race to redevelop Europe, to enrich Europe. And we're going to drain the backs of Africa. The slaves would come from Africa. The mineral resources would come from Africa. And they got into a race. A race started with about 9 European nations. The French, the Germans, the English, Arabs, all of them pitched in together to get a contest going. Racism is a contest just like a bicycle race, an automobile race. All those nations were competing. And what they're saying is that he who gets to the finish line first, or get to the Americas first, and develop all those resources in America, and become the most powerful group, they win. All the countries pitched in. Every group pitched in to try to get into this race to develop the Western world. And they said, if we get there, we're going to make sure we use the slaves to do it. Now, when slavery finally ended in 1859, when Charles Darwin came out with what he called the survival of the species and the survival of the strongest, that's when slavery ended. Because prior to that time, you see, slavery was an economic issue. And when slavery ended in 1859, right before the Civil War, the game was over. They took the word race, R-A-C-E, and said, the race is over, no more race. Because right now, we as the dominant groups, white groups, the European whites, we own and control 100% of everything. Black people were the only people who were not permitted to be in the race. And so what they did then, they took the E off of race and stuck ISM on it. ISM is a suffix, which means maintain the prevailing conditions. And so if the dominant European society owns and controls everything, black slaves own nothing, the race is over. And then ISM means and says, don't let anything change. If whites own 99.5% of everything of value, don't let any of it move into the hands of the blacks. That's what racism is. Racism means keep and control all the wealth, resource and power and privileges in the hands of one group. And so they invite me to come down here. They said, Dr. Anderson, please don't go out there and excite those blacks when they want to go on and control something. We got them locked and boxed, just like they are. They own nothing. They can't get out of the box. We got a social construct. We got them locked. Now, how are you going to tell them to get out of there if we already got them locked? I said, here's what we're going to do. Because you were locked by the Constitution. They crafted the first Constitution. The first United States Constitution was drafted to be an affirmative action plan for whites. That's the first affirmative action plan. I wrote the second one in 1970 for the state of Florida. But the first one was written by the United States Constitution by Thomas Jefferson and Judge Madison. They wrote the affirmative action to give whites privilege of wealth and power and resources. They controlled and owned everything. So when you hear whites talking about they're against affirmative action, they're not against affirmative action as long as they're benefiting. They're against affirmative action that will redistribute those wealth and resources into your hands. So what you're going to have to start doing, and my point tonight in my speech, you got to start stressing that you are a very unique people. Yeah. Okay? Never in all my years in politics, in national politics, local politics, and going in international situations, I've never heard a black person stand up and stress the uniqueness of black folk. That's right. That's your problem. That's your problem, and you're guilty of it, and I'm guilty of it, and all the blacks in America are guilty of it. Now, why did I say that? Because you see, the United States, when I was taking trade missions into Venezuela or Colombia, when I would go to Cuba, or I went to Nigeria or Germany, one of the first things they brag about is that the United States is an exceptional nation. They talk about exceptionality. They talk about exceptionality and brag about America being an exceptional nation. And therefore, that they're entitled to special privileges. And you say, what do you mean by exceptional? They said, the United States said, well, because exceptional by definition means something that's unusual, something that's different, something that's been treated different, the uncommon. And see, and black folk have never reversed it. You all must start now leave here to reversing that cycle. That's right. And say, no. If the United States is a nation and it deserves special privileges when it's with all the other nations in the world. If we got the United Nations in New York, and the United States gets special privileges and special recognition and special attention and special treatment because it proclaims itself to be exceptional. Black folk must start this day proclaiming that you are an exceptional group. Right. Now let's go through history and show you what I mean. Every chance you get, you must stress that you are different. There is nobody on this earth. There's nobody on this earth like black Americans. Nobody. There's nobody in the Caribbean islands. There's nobody in Africa like black Americans. You are totally different from all the human beings on the earth. You're the only one. You're the unusual. You don't want to be treated in a certain manner. You deserve respect because of your exceptionality. Let's track through history now. You are the only one, for instance. You were the first people on earth. Now people talk about, well, Dr. Anderson, before you get into that now, we got other groups that are equal to black folk. We got Hispanics, we got Asians, we got Arabs, we got American Indians, we got all these other groups. Are they exception? No. Nobody has been treated like black folk. And therefore, because of the black folk exceptionality, please do not put them in any of these broad, ambiguous categories. I don't want to hear you calling black folk people of color, diversity, multicultural, minorities. What in the world is a minority? Is that a peg-legged man with one eye? What's a minority? Is that a humpback and midget? There is no such thing as a minority. And yet my people go around their inappropriate behavior patterns. Yeah, I'm a minority. And you go look at the dictionary, minority means a loser. Why would my people brag about being a loser? Why would they brag about something they can't define? They don't know what a minority is. They don't know what a minority is. What is a people of color? Everybody has some color. What is multicultural? Multicultural means more than one culture. Well, if I go up down in the street right now, right here in Fort Lauderdale, I'll find Asian restaurant, Thailand restaurant, Vietnamese restaurant, Italian restaurant, German restaurant, French restaurant. I find everything except a black one. Why would you talk about multicultural when you don't want to not included? Where are your businesses? You can't be for multicultural because you're not included. Well, Dr. Anderson, we're for diversity. Don't you know that diversity came out in 1705? Which means don't ever let black folk get together without putting a few whites among them to monitor them, keep them, to watch them, patrol them, and know what they're up to. Why would a black person promote and advocate diversity? Because that was a 1705 law. That's why the whole state of Georgia came into existence, because blacks were escaping from South Carolina and running down into Florida, where you all are. And they want to put up a buffer zone. And so they want to create another colony called Georgia. So that anytime they have a buffer zone, they didn't have any whites. And so the colonies could petition the European nations to clean out their prisons, clean out their hospitals, clean out their mental institutions, insane asylums, pick up all the people in the poorhouses and ship them on boats over here in the United States and set up a colony called Georgia. That's why Georgia's so damn weird. You got them all in there. That was going to be a buffer for so blacks were running out from escaping from slavery from South Carolina trying to get to Florida. And what they said then in the diversity law of 1705, and again another law in Virginia about 1743, said that for every 4 black slaves you have, you must have at least 1 white to monitor. If you're going to let them go to church, you must have a white sitting there. If they're going to have a school, you must have a white sitting in the classroom. And so blacks are still being monitored under the concept of diversity. But they'll run out right now and say, we are for diversity, we are for minorities and people of color. Quit, stop, cease, don't do any more inappropriate behavior. You are unique. There's nobody on earth like you. That's why I said you were the first people on earth. If you're the first people on earth, you're the only one here. Who else could have been the first? You can't be the second to be first. The first people on earth were black people. All people came out of Africa. You didn't come out of whiteness. There is no color in white. The only thing you get color out of is blackness. They came out of blackness as they migrated around the world. There's a Discovery Channel did a beautiful thing that's called Will the Real Eves Stand Up? Showing you that it's the real, that it came out of blackness. You're the first, but you're the only one. You're the exception. You're the unusual because you were first. Then in America, they talk about America, that you got Native Americans over here, that they are the Native Americans, that they are the American. They were not the Native Americans. The so-called Native Americans now, that you see all around Florida, they came to America across the Bourbon Straits about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. But the Folsom people came here 15,000 to 16,000 years ago, right out of Africa. And they inhabited a whole Gulf Coast of Mexico, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. That's why you go out there and you find a Folsom, Arizona, a Folsom prison, a Folsom artifacts, a Folsom, California. The Folsom people came out of Africa. So how in the world can America need to be the native people, when they came here after you? If you're the first people on earth, nobody is like you. They're not like you. Are the first people on earth. You're unique. You're the first people in America. You're the only one. You're the only people that have a special credit on this earth. 6 out of every 7 people coming to the United States for the first 300 years were black slaves. Those 600, the 6 out of 7 coming to the United States for the first 300 years of the development of this country were black slaves. They weren't Asians. They weren't Hispanics. They weren't gays. They were black people. You were the only one that's exceptional. You were the people that were exceptional. You were exceptional in that regard. When they developed the Constitution, the Constitution specifically said that certain people were going to be classified as property. 3/5 of a human being. And be equal to a field animal. They did not speak to Asians. They didn't make Asians field animals, or 3/5 of a human being. They didn't make Hispanics or Cubans 3/5 of a human being. They didn't make Mexicans 3/5 of a human being. They only made blacks. You are the exception. You were the exception of people that they made and gave a label of being 3/5 of a human being. People are designated as being equal to a farm animal. Only black folk. Then when the Constitution was ratified in about 1789, and the first nationalization of immigration law was written in 1790, it stipulated very clearly that this is going to be a white nation. It's going to be a white nation. Only for white Europeans as a white nation. They excluded black folk. They didn't exclude everybody else, they excluded black folk. And so black folk, you have to understand that you are unique in all these things. And then at that point they say, well, we're going to be a nation of immigrants. They put a 0 quota on black folk. They didn't put a 0 quota on Asians and Arabs and Hispanics and gays and midgets and humpbacks and lesbians. They put it only on black folk. You're unique. You're the exception. So if I keep mentioning these exceptions, how in the world do you allow yourself to be put in a broad, ambiguous category called minorities and poor folk and people when you're totally different. Nobody on earth has been treated like you. Nobody's been treated like you. If nobody's been treated like you, just like the United States brags about being an exceptional nation, you are an exceptional nation within a nation. You are different. Why don't you stand up and demand and say, no, don't put me in these categories. Don't call me a minority. I have not had those experiences. We've been treated different from everybody. And then later on they came up again. If they had black folk, they started the immigration laws. And the Europeans poured in. And they started getting land grants. For every white person who owned a slave could get 640 acres of free land for every slave. They didn't give any black folks 640 acres of slave for every slave. For head rights, they could pick up 1,000 acres of land. Just in the land rush of the 1880s, in the land rush of the 1880s with the Oklahoma Territory, after the Civil War, the Europeans poured into this country, and in 24 hours, y'all know what I'm talking about for 24 hours, that's one day. In one day, Europeans picked up over 1 million to 2 million acres of free land. They didn't pay for the land, they got it free. They got free land. Now, what you should be thinking is, now, what if black folk had not been the exception? If black folk had not been the exception going back to drafting the Constitution, if black folk had been able to vote and not the exception, would the United States Constitution look the way it looks now if black folk had had a chance to help write the Constitution?
Of course not.
If I were to go out west and I see all these, I got whites that own 50,000, 40,000 acres of land for ranches and farms in the Midwest and in the Southwest and all across the country. If black folk had been able to have gotten the free land, look what you would have had. Would the country still look the same if black folk had been given thousands and thousands of free land and on that land have all the timber, the gold, the silver, the chrome, the bauxite, the magnesium? What would black folk have done there? What would the country look like as the country began to develop? Because see, black folk were the exception. You were different from everybody else. You were being treated differently. But yet you keep talking about social integration. How in the world can you be different at the same time you keep trying to integrate? Keep saying, I want to be like everybody else. How are you going to be like everybody else when you never treated like everybody else? You never got the benefits that everybody else got. You've never been like everybody else. You were the people. Black people were the people that went across the country. And with their labor, they built the houses, the buildings. They built Washington, D.C., the Capitol, the White House. They built most of the schools, the big old schools, Harvard University and all the other big schools, and Notre Dame. They built the schools. Black folk took their sweat out of their body and built the canals and the roads. The Asians didn't do it. The Arabs didn't do it. The Hispanics didn't do it. The Cubans didn't do it. You did it. But you don't get any credit because you failed to claim your exceptionality, that you're different. And if you're different, don't put me in that category. But you've never had the chance or never took the chance to say that is inappropriate behavior on our part. They keep going around pretending we're no different than anyone else. You are different. And I hear people say, well, you know, don't tell people you're better than anybody. I am better than a lot of people. I don't mind telling you.
All right.
My mother never told me to go out and say, don't go out and tell me you're. Yes, I am. I'm better than a hell of a lot of damn people. You start saying, yeah, we're better. We built all this stuff. And the greatest insult to your exceptionality is for you to go into a school system or into a public arena and allow people to keep using this thing about all people have contributed equally to the development of this country. That's a lie. That is a lie. All people did not contribute to develop this country. You contributed. You put in the sweat. And I want black folk to understand this day, and as long as you live, You are not guests in America. You're not guests in America. You walk on sacred ground, paid for by the blood, sweat, tears, and suffering and sacrificing of millions of black cooks, butlers, waiters, and janitors, dishwashers. Why in the world let somebody keep putting you in a bag about what you're just like everybody else? That adds insult to injury. You were injured when they did it to you, and now you're going to let them insult you by putting you in the bag, make you pretend you're equal to everybody else. They're not equal to you. They're not equal. In this country, you are not the guest. It's the immigrants that came here are the guest. They are the guest. And in a home, the owner has got a priority over the guest. You are the natives in this country. You are the natives on this earth. And that's what you should be standing up for. You got to remember when I leave here that 98% of all the black people in America right now are the direct descendants of slaves. Now what does that mean for you in your exceptionality? And when you begin to proclaim your exceptionality, you proclaim it every place you go that we are an exception. You proclaim, I want to see it on t-shirts, sweaters, on signs, bulletin boards, that we are the exception. We are exception. We're different from everybody else. If 98% of you are the direct descendants of slaves, that means you were here before 98% of all the rest arrived. And you hear some very right-wing conservative whites talking about, well, why don't you all go back to Africa? You say, look, first of all, the ones that came last should leave first. Not only in this country, but off the earth. Y'all go on to the moon and leave us alone. God gave us the earth in our image. And we don't have to go back to Africa. The whole earth belonged to us, was given to us. And we built this country. And we demand your respect for our contributions and what we've done. Don't get in our face telling us about all people who contribute equally. We know they haven't. We know they haven't. Because, and to give you an example about the population. Let's go back. I started to say back 100 years. Let's go back further. Let's go back to about the 1860s, right, the Civil War. At the Civil War, you had somewhere around approximately only about 4,000. Only about 4,000 Hispanics in the entire United States. 4,000 Hispanics in the United States. Now let's move. And at that time you had 5.5 million black folk. Now you all watch these numbers now. You had 5.5 million black folk and only 4,000 Hispanics. By the year 1900, the Hispanics had increased their population up to 100,000. So Hispanics have gone from 4,000 up to 100,000 in about 40 years. Black people, though, had gone from about 5 to 5.5 million up to 11.5 million. And now that was it. Now that takes you back. That's in 1900. Now from 1900 to year 2000, Hispanics and blacks got the same identical birth rate. The same identical birth rate. They only got 100,000. You got 11.5 million with the same birth rate. And guess what happened in 2000? They caught you and passed you. Even with the same birth rate, they still caught 100,000, caught 11.5 million and passed them. You know why? Why? Because they were coming across the border 5,000 or 6,000 a night, pouring into the country, legal and illegal. And you had immigration laws that wouldn't let you come in. You were restricted. Up to 1920, in 1924, the immigration code on black folk was 0. You weren't permitted to come into the country because the majority of society does not wish to give up any of its advantages, its power, its wealth, and its resources that they got from black folk. So you see, that was the whole purpose of slavery. It was the whole purpose of slavery. The whole purpose of slavery was to maldistribute, in that race I talked to you about a few minutes ago, to maldistribute almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, power, privileges, resources, jobs, opportunity into the hands of the dominant white society. And since then, 87% of all that went into their hands is now frozen. It is now locked into the white society. It's locked in. It's locked in terms of stocks, bonds, real estate investments, insurance policies, trust accounts. It's frozen. Only 13% is up for grabs. You all got to take a shot at the only thing that's left is 13% is up for grabs. Because the rest is frozen. And you hear whites in Washington, D.C. talking about inheritance laws, passing on things to their kids. We got to look out for our children. What they're telling you is that all that frozen assets we have, we're going to pass it on to the next generation. Now, how does that work? See, that land I told you about out west, when they picked up all that land, let's take the 1 million acres of land that they got free. Free, no money, just free. 1 million to 2 million acres of land. Without putting one penny down. You see, in every generation, every 20 years, that land multiplied in value by 20%. That's where they get all the billions of money from, income. That's why right now in this country, that your net worth as black people is exactly where it was in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War. You live in the richest country on earth, and you have not increased in wealth by one iota. You're exactly where you were. And the sad part about it is that most of the blacks in the country have is a sissy in a CC camp. No wealth. They think being integrated is their salvation. They haven't got a pot or one to throw it out of. And consequently, if you look at the statistics, you find that the average white person in America has 3,500 times the wealth of a black person. Now, you in here who are particularly noted for your intellectual facility and gymnastics mentally, you explain to me how in the world can you compete against people that got 3,500 times more money than you have? Let me put it a little more pointedly. In America, where you got almost 42 to 43 million black people, you have 42 to 43 million black people, and guess what? I got 2 to 3 white men that got more wealth than all of you put together. You might not have heard that. Let me try it again. For all 42 to 43 million black folk, if you take all your wealth and put it on the table together, I can put on the other side of the table 2 to 3 white men that have more than you got. If I allowed you all up to stretch around the world, you still couldn't even compete with just 2 to 3 whites. What kind of game are you playing down here? Social integration. Now, keep in mind now, when you start talking about going after your exceptionality and getting people to understand what racism is, don't be angry and make it, because we're not going after it. I don't want you to go out and fight and curse and shoot and cut anybody. They whipped us and took advantage of us, that's gone. And I want you to hate anybody. We're going to learn how to think and play the same game they play and get our resources back. We're going to learn how to play the game. And for a black woman, and the feminist movement that started in the civil rights movement, they love to trick them. They love to trick black women. Black women will run out in a second and join all the white women. Because the white women said we want an equality of income like the white man. Now, anybody with more than a 6th grade education would say, look, as a white woman, doing slavery and Jim Crow segregation, over 400 years, you as a white woman co-own, co-control, co-influence, and inherited 100% of everything a white man had. You sleep in the same bed, put your feet on the same table, raise his kids, slept in the same house. What are you talking about? And to break the statistics down again, you find that for every dollar that a white woman has, a black woman to run a house has 2 cents. As a black woman, you got to try to run a household with 2 cents when she's got $1. You're in trouble. But I guarantee you that most of the black women, particularly French, they're going to run and join the white women. See what I'm saying? They're going to take it called a feminist cause.
Yeah.
They have yet to figure out that trying to equate or compare sexism with racism is like trying to compare a headache with cancer. It might be a headache being a woman once in a while, but it's cancerous being black. Because you're in a society, you're in a social construct that has you nailed to the wall. And again, you have to imagine, what if we had gotten all the resources that all these other groups got? So what they did as the immigrants began to pour in this country, they said, here's what we're going to do. Let's proclaim that America is a nation of immigrants. Again, you got them. Why? Because you're the only non-immigrants in the country. You're the only non-immigrants. All the programs are designed for what? For immigrants. And you want to know why you never get anything. You want to know, like somebody told me earlier, that in the state of Florida, that you got a legislative program budget that puts out something like $65 million to help youth, problem youth. And it goes to nonprofit corporations. I asked them how many blacks to get it. They said they don't get any of it. I said, how much money? They said $65 million. I said, where does the money go? They said, well, I don't know if this is accurate, but they said 16 million goes just to Cubans. And see this assembly, they get what they want because they're immigrants. When Cubans came into the country in Florida, they came in with value. What was their value? They came in because of several things. 1, white skin. 2, culture. 3, a language. So they came into Florida and Miami. Immediately they started demanding that the hotels on the beach fire all the blacks on the beach. All the black cleaning women working in those hotels got fired. All the black attendants got fired. And the Cubans took over the beach. Then they went downtown in Miami and demanded that the businesses employ people who spoke Spanish. They said, if you don't speak Spanish, you got to get another job. And so to be bilingual. Nobody raised a cane and said, hold a second. That is discrimination. That is bias. That's bigotry. Now that is racism. How in the world are you going to come into a country and tell black folk, native black folk, that if you're not bilingual and don't speak Spanish, you can't have a job? I told the women that came to see me, I said, why don't you go to see the Urban League NAACP and raise Cane? They said they won't help us. Nobody's going to help them. Nobody's going to help them. Why? Because even though black folk are getting an exception, all those immigrants came into the country, they get special benefits. They got programs for them that are specifically designed. But never in the history of this nation has there been one single solitary piece of legislation that's ever stayed in effect that was specifically designed to help black people. Never. But black folk don't demand it. They demand stuff for minorities and poor folk. When I was with President Carter, as soon as we won the election, I ran Jimmy Carter's campaign right here in Florida for the presidency. And one of the meetings they had, and here the Civil Rights Organization came over. They met with Carter, and President Carter said, Mr. Carter, black folk helped you get elected. We turned out. We gave you this heavy vote. We did this, we did that. Now we got some problems. What are you going to do for minority women and children? I said, wait a minute now, something's wrong. Somebody switched track. That was called bait and switch. Go back again. You can start saying that that black folk did this. They worked and put you in office, and black folk got problems, but all of a sudden the solution will be for everybody. I cannot get that out of black folks' head. If you're the crippled person, the handicapped person, and you need a wheelchair, why would you let anybody come along and say, we're going to give wheelchairs to everybody? Everybody don't need the wheelchairs. You also got to be very specific. Never go into the marketplace or into a political arena using very broad and ambiguous terms. You must always be very specific based on your exceptionality. Only for you. We want this for us. It's for our people. We got special problems, and we're going to meet and greet as long as we can until we come together with some solutions to help us. Now, if you all don't like it, tough. We don't care. If you don't like what we do in our community, stay out of our communities. We don't need you to come in our communities and tell us what we should not be doing. I don't need the Fox Channel saying, those blacks over there meeting, planning, scheming. You're supposed to meet, plan, and scheme. That's what you should be doing all the time. To learn how to pull yourself together. If they call you a racist because you're interested in your people, they're called blacks. Well, if you're interested in black folk, you got to be a racist. But you see, they never say that about anybody else.
All right.
You know, well, Dr. Anderson, you got to understand, but things that you're proposing, it's just too black. I said, what is too black? They said, well, too black is just too black. I said, why is it? I said, why is it that I never hear anything being too Jewish, or too white, or too Arab, or too Asian, or too Indian? Why is it they always want to put a T-double-O in front of me in the middle of black folk? Because you don't demand the respect based on your exceptionality. You built the country. You did all these things. Now here comes affirmative action. I wrote the plan. And so let me go before you get to that point. I'm jumping too far ahead. Let me go back in history a little further. After the first Constitution was written, black folk was down as slaves. One black guy named Dred Scott. Whites sponsored him to go to the Supreme Court and file a lawsuit. Why? Because he left Missouri going up to Illinois, and he said he was free. And they're going to the Supreme Court case. But the Supreme Court ruled that, by Chief Justice Taney says that, no, a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. I'm going to say it to you again. The United States Supreme Court said this, that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Now, notice very clearly again, did you all hear anything about Indians, Asian, Hispanic, that they don't have any rights? It was very specific to whom? Black. Who? Black people. That you all don't have any rights. They didn't include all these groups that they put you into with the minorities and poor folk and people of color. The court did not say people of color didn't have any rights. It didn't say Asians and Arabs didn't have any rights. It didn't say women and gays didn't have any rights. It says black people. And so that was the Dred Scott decision in 1857. Now, after the Civil War came, the radical Republicans decided to have so we got to do something about this. We can't have this going on because now slavery is supposed to be over. And so they tried to pass a couple of laws. First one being they wrote the Emancipation Proclamation for Lincoln. But Lincoln didn't free not one single slave. As a matter of fact, what Lincoln said is, I don't care about slavery. I'm out just trying to save the Union. You can keep all the slaves you want as long as you all come back together as what? As a team. If all you whites in all these states that come back together as a team, you can keep those slaves. And at best, if you come back and what we'll do with them, if you don't want them, we'll build a special place for them in Texas. We'll ship them to the Bahamas. Or back to Liberia. And so Lincoln didn't do anything. So now so the radical Republicans say, I tell you what, these are a few liberal whites in Congress, and most of them either had black mistresses and had black children. And so they put out the first Civil Rights Law of 1865, which was very specific to black people. Very specific. And Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln after he got assassinated, he vetoed it. And so the radical Republicans came out the next year and wrote it again. They wrote it as an economic issue. It became the 1866 Civil Rights Law. And what the radical Republicans said is this. This was Congressman Thaddeus Stevens, Sumner, and Benjamin. They said this, that there's only two things that a black person can be in America. You're either going to be slaves or you're going to be free. But minimally, for you black folk to be free, you must have either 40 acres, a mule, and $100. And guess what? Andrew Johnson vetoed it again. And they said this is an economic issue, but this time the radical Republicans overrode it. And that's why the 1866 Civil Rights Law is still on the books. And in that Civil Rights Law, it says that every level of government has an obligation to lift the burdens of legacies of slavery off the shoulders of black folk. Nobody's doing it. Why don't you go to your legislators, go to people now in elected office and say, why aren't you carrying out the 1866 Civil Rights Law? It says you're supposed to be lifting these things and helping us do these things. We shouldn't have to meet over here at a library in the darkness, sneak on the plan. The elected officers in this country are supposed to be doing it. They swore an oath in office to do it, to work and serve and take care of you. But nobody's doing it. Based on that 1866 law, they converted it over to be the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was again strictly for black folk. It was a rewrite of the 1866 Civil Rights Law. It was for black people. It was for black people. It was for the exceptional people. The 14th Amendment was for the exceptional people. The 14th Amendment was not for everybody. Everybody else already had their rights. They already had due process. That's why in 300 or 400 years they never had to go need the 14th Amendment. They didn't need it. Just like the 15th Amendment, the voting rights. They didn't need a voting law. Because every white could vote if he owned property. Those laws, those amendments, was written for black folk because you all were the exception. But guess who's using them now? The immigrants are using those laws. The immigrants are using laws that were written for the exceptional people. And guess who backs them up? The United States Supreme Court. Because the United States Supreme Court, primary responsibility is to keep black folk in a social construct, locked and boxed. That's why you hear people like Clarence Thomas talking about, we want to go back to the original intent of the Constitution. The original intent was for black folk to be slaves. 3/5 of the human being be treated like animals. But the 14th Amendment was written for black folk. And yet now, as these Hispanics are coming across the border, let's say out in Texas, they're claiming they want their 14th Amendment rights. It was not written for them. When black folk try to go to school, like at the Barker decision out of the University of Davis campus in California, and he doesn't get admitted. He says it's reverse discrimination to give preferential treatment to blacks. It was not unconstitutional. It was what they supposed to have done.
Get something to drink. Get you something to drink. So keep going.
Right behind you.
Excuse me. But see, but what was that now? 14th Amendment. Okay, the 14th Amendment.
Can you stop at 7:45 so we can buy your books? Because at 8 we got to be out.
Yeah, okay. But I tell you what if I talk about another 15 minutes?
Yeah.
It was okay. I want to get to some good things I think you want to know. But in the 14th Amendment, there's a group of whites jumped up down in New Orleans that says, we're going to use that 14th Amendment for due process and equal protection that was written for black folk. Nobody else needed equal protection because nobody was doing anything to it. The 14th Amendment, due process and equal protection, was written for the excluded group. Those who were treated differently, those who were unusual, those who were not the norm, the uncommon people. And so they said, we're going to come to the Supreme Court and use the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court rendered a decision in 1872. It says this. Y'all need to remember this. They said that the 14th Amendment was written exclusively for black folk to stop the white society from continuing using, enslaving, and exploiting people of African descent. That was a slaughterhouse case by the United States Supreme Court in 1872. And yet, nobody cares. Right now, all these immigrants are coming and getting all these rights. They get free tuition, get driver's license, get in, do anything they want. They're using the laws that were written for the exceptional people, the different people. So what you should be doing is basing everything around your exceptionality. Everything. And I know when you leave here, you're not going to do it. I know you're not. You should always say, we are exceptional people. We're not going to put us in these broad groups. We're going to come together and try to get out of this hole as quickly as we can. Now, so that happened. So they created what's called a Freedmen Bureau. It says now all these slaves are free. 5 million of them running the fields. We owe them something because initially we're going to give them 40 acres of mule and $100. Guess what they did? They expanded it to put in displaced whites in the South. So that most of the resources they never went to black folk. All the old plantation owners then got all their land back. And they got all their land back because they expanded the Freedmen Bureau that was set up for black folk. And they also set up the Freedmen Banks for black folk. And all the land that blacks were supposed to have gotten, the land and the 40 acres of mule, went back to whites, the old plantation masters. Then they passed what's called the Black Code Laws, which says that black folk, if you don't have a job working for those old masters, we're going to arrest you for vagrancy, put you in jail. That became a peonage system of what's called black codes. That's why you get back in this whole Jim Crow segregation stuff started. So again, only black people were enslaved. Only black people were Jim Crow segregated. Nobody Jim Crow segregated in the Cubans or Hispanics or Asians or Arabs or Indians. No. Nobody. So in the 1960s, when we came out of Jim Crow segregation, the first thing we should be looking for, we should be looking and say, what do we need to go back and make amends to repair what you've done to us for 400 years for the exceptional people? Nobody did that. Now we had a lot of good civil rights leaders. They were very bright people, very smart people. And I credit them, they were very brave people. Because I never would have done some of the things they did. But they didn't look far enough down the road. They said what we'll take is just social integration. If we just get along with whites. If we can just go to their schools. If we can just go to their restaurants and their hotels. Now that hurt us. Why? Because when they filed that original lawsuit for desegregation, it was not filed. It was not filed for social integration. It was filed because in Clinton, South Carolina, where my hometown, when I grew up down that area, it was filed because what? By black parents in Clinton, South Carolina were saying that white kids, they had all the resources. Right. The teachers were being paid, or the state was being paid, and the school system was receiving $11 for a white child and $1.50 for a black child to go to school. And so when I was going to school in the South, we had to spend the first week of school every year getting the old textbooks for the white schools and taking tape and erasers and cleaning out the dirt and trash out of them and fixing them up and taping them up. They sent us their old textbooks. Their schools had all the playgrounds. Their schools had the swimming pools. Their schools had the tennis courts. What we wanted in the South at that time in my area, we didn't want social integration. We wanted equal money, funds, resources in our hands. But again, some of our leaders said, no, let's get rid of everything black. Let's get rid of all the black schools. We had good black schools, good black teachers, strong black teachers. We had black communities. We had black communities where you had to do right. You lived next door to the store, and across the street was a lawyer, down the street was a store owner. The dentist was down the street. You all knew each other. And you respected each other, you appreciated each other, you loved each other. You didn't have to lock your doors. Right. You could go downtown and leave your door wide open, the front door and the back door, and people would walk through and get what they wanted. And say, Mr. Jones, watch the kids, I'll be back in a little while, child. Yes, those days are gone, because when you went to social integrations, you got tricked and bamboozled. Because what the white society did, they took and corrupted what you wanted. Teach. They took the Highway Act of 1952 and 1956, and drove the expressway through every black neighborhood and tore up your businesses. Why? Because racism is an economic issue. It's not whether or not you like anybody, you want anybody, you want to get along with people. It's an economic issue. It has nothing to do with discrimination, preferences, bigotry, hatred, bias. That is not racism. Racism is this. Right now, I'm biased. I'm prejudiced. Like for ice cream, I like burgundy cherry ice cream. I'm prejudiced toward burgundy cherry ice cream. The big black cherry, I love that. And when I want that, when I want it, I go down to the store. What store I go to? I'm biased towards Tom and Jerry's. I want to get that ice cream. I go there and get it. What is it? It's one of them. Okay. But wait a minute. I'll go get that favorite ice cream. I get it in the store, and I get that ice cream. Now, I'm biased towards it because of my previous experience. So I'm prejudiced toward burgundy cherry. I'm biased to where I get it. Now, when I walk into the shop, I see a whole big case of all kind of ice cream. Chocolate Kaboo, Vanilla Mellow, Marshmallow Yellow, all this kind of stuff. See, and so what I do, I have to discriminate. So I discriminate. I go down like this, discriminate what I want. So I'm biased, I'm prejudiced, and I'm biased, and I have a preference. But that is not racism.
That's right.
So getting along with people is not racism. People say, well, because you don't like whites, you're racist. No, they ain't got nothing to do with racism. Racism is an economic issue. It's group-based. It's a power-based relationship. When people compete to own and control resources, then use that power to enslave, Jim Crow, segregate, and do other people in. That's racism. And so don't let them trick you in that thing. But what we're going to do then is that once you start learning how to play this game, you got to go build communities. Build you some communities as quickly as you can. Go around this day and find you a nice location around here someplace where you can find a nice location where you got some good traffic flow and call everybody together just like you got right now. Call everybody, all the blacks you can get. If you can't, send out notices and emails and social contacts and bring them all into a big auditorium. And you put all those who want to go in business over here, those who are in business over there. And you say, we're going to build a community. And the first thing we're going to do, we're going to select the proper neighborhood to build a black business district. You want a black business district. And then you build those businesses around what you need. And I'll give you a whole list of things you have to have. You need everything that white folks need. But in specifics for the future, always try to initially to concentrate on these 4 businesses that are imperative. That's food, water, medicine, and energy. Try to get as many of those things nailed down. But black folk need everything everybody else needs. You get that, you build it, bring them together, pick a district, then get about a 2-block area. Then you go in and say, now, if we were to build a black district, business district, how many of you black business owners would be willing to take your present businesses and relocate into that district? And get a feeling for how many would relocate into that district. Then you go back to this other side, those who want to go in business, and how many over here that want to go into business would be willing to build a business in these kind of need areas, these kind of product areas in that district. And you get that commitment. Then once you get past that point, you try to see if you can get control of that 2-block area. Work on it when you got a good traffic flow by either renting or buying the businesses. And you put all your businesses there. Because if you don't get communities, if you don't have communities, then don't go in business. Do not go into business if you don't have a community. Don't waste your time. You'll go bankrupt in about 2 years. Because if you don't have a community, you have no market. If you don't have a market, you have no customers. Because you see, other groups are not going to buy from you. They're going to boycott you. It's right now, in a given day, on a Saturday morning, you'll never ever see a white person get up, for instance, drive down to a black neighborhood, go into a black store and buy something made by black folk. He ain't going to do it. He understands that is a maldistribution or redistribution of his wealth back to the black community. He's going to boycott you. Asians are going to boycott you. Every other group is going to boycott you. Not because they're mean people, but because they're doing what they're supposed to do. They buy from their own people first. That's what you're supposed to do, buy from your own people first. And when you produce these products, then you create these businesses, then you hire your own children. Hire your own, and forget about this stuff about you want to be fair and have a good representation to show you want to be a rainbow. No, forget the rainbow. Hire your own children. It is criminal, absolutely criminal, for you to keep having babies and send them out to somebody else, send them to school, then send them to somebody else's neighborhood begging for a job. They don't want your kids in their neighborhood and their businesses.
That's right.
They don't need them and don't want them. If I was white, why do I want your kids sitting up in my business? For what? How's that going to benefit me? And see, now I tell all our civil organizations to quit trying to teach black kids how to look for jobs, prepare them to look for jobs, and teach them in school how to make jobs.
Right.
And then hire your own people. And when you go in these businesses, you start to set up these businesses. I'm going in a hurry now. You set up these businesses, always try to capture and control your own people's dollars first. Try to get those dollars. You got an annual disposable income of almost $1 trillion a year in this country, but you only keep 98% of it in your communities. I mean, on 2% in your communities. 98% is spent outside your communities. You got to try to make your money bounce at least 8 to 12 times before it leaves your community. Hispanic money typically bounces 6 to 7 times. White money bounces 8 to 12 times. Arabs and Asian money bounces 13 to 14 times. Jewish money bounces 18 times. Black money doesn't bounce once. The danger zone in America is when a black person gets paid for you to get between him and a mall where he's going to go to and spend it. He'll run over you trying to get out and get his money into someone else's hands. And right now I have the dubious I'm having a business where all my customers were Asians. They used to tell me straight up, Dr. Anderson, we ain't buying from no black folk. You got Carl Nelson sitting right in this auditorium right now when he went to one of the biggest producers, distributors of foodstuffs into the Caribbean islands. And the Chinese guy who become a multi-billionaire told him how he became wealthy. He sold all the products in grocery stores in the Caribbean islands, the Virgin Islands, Jamaica, the Bahamas. He asked Carl, said, what can I do for you? Carl says, all I want to do is for you to buy some time on our radio station. And Carl says, and the guy told us, no, I can't do that. He said, why not? He said, because that's against my culture. In my culture, the China man must never follow the black man man must follow the China man. And when blacks came up to Washington, D.C., went down to 8th Street and tried to sell their products. The blacks there, they went down to 8th Street to try to sell some products as distributors. And they met with the Asian merchants. And they told the Asian merchant, we want you to sell you some of these products. The Asian merchant says, well, we're not interested. And so these black distributors said, I tell you what, we'll sell you out these products are the same products you got on your shelf and give you a 25 to 30% discount. They said, we're still not interested. And so then these black distributors say, hold a second. If we give you a 25 to 30% discount, why would you be interested in the product? And the Asian merchant says, you black folk don't understand. It ain't the money. It's that we buy only from our own people. Only you people will buy from any and everybody. You got to learn how to buy from your own people first. And when people start telling you, as I started off earlier, talking about you too, race conscious, your problem is just the opposite. You're not race conscious enough. That's your problem. You're not race conscious enough. You want to be something other than black. Most of these people don't want to be black. They hate blackness. They hate blackness. I've been all over the world for 30-something years, traveling in different countries. No black person ever mistreated me. They've been nice to my books. They always sell extremely well. They've always been extraordinarily good to me. So if I can get along with blacks all around the world, why can't the rest of y'all get along with black folks without fighting and fussing? And buy from your own people. And if you hire a black person, he doesn't do a good job, you hold him accountable. And so I tell you what, I'm going to hire you to do this for me. And I'm going to pay you well. But if you don't, but you better do a damn good job. And if you don't, I'm going to keep calling you back. I'm coming looking for you. And you got to give him a certain amount of time to do the job. And hold him accountable and responsible. And quit talking about, well, a black man cheated me 10 years ago. I ain't going to never buy from another black. White folk enslaved your butt for 400 years. You still going with them? Yeah, they want me to give up the ghost. So I didn't get through all my stuff. I had a bunch of notes to go through with you all. Come back. Yeah, I got to get you out of here and get the book. So anyway, I love you all. Did y'all get it? But one last thing, y'all understand what I'm saying to you? Start practicing exceptionality and telling everybody. Don't let anybody put you in broad, ambiguous categories. No groupings. You're going to say, stand out, say, we are entitled to special things for the special things we've done. It's an insult and an injury to pretend that somehow there's no difference between a black person and a gay person and a midget and a humpback and a lesbian. As a matter of fact, to tell you the truth, I think I just been there about the lesbian. The two of the biggest slave owners in New Orleans. You know what it was? It was called the two sisters. Two gay sisters in New Orleans were the biggest slave owners. And the restaurant, they had a restaurant called the Two Sisters Restaurant, and it still exists right now in New Orleans. But I love all of you all. Take care, and I'm going to sign these books for you, okay? I'll come back whenever y'all want me to come back.